Thank you all for being here, and of course I need to thank some people. I want to thank David, I want to thank B&H, I want to thank Sony for sponsoring this also, and I want to thank Lindblad. As a Nat Geo photographer for all these years, I've recently been doing a lot of the Lindblad trips, and I do have to say that traveling on the Lindblad ships is great. You get to see some great places, you get to see great animals, and the terrific thing about the Lindblad ships is that your hotel is following you. You don't have to move. It's all, it's all traveling with you. No unpacking, no repacking. So I've been doing pictures for National Geographic for over 30 years. And it's a long time. I've seen a lot of changes. But I still love traveling and taking photos. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that nothing great was ever accomplished without enthusiasm. And for me, I'm still super enthusiastic about taking pictures, even though I've been doing this since I was in high school. And the fact that you are all here at this event must make you enthusiastic about being a photographer and taking all these pictures. And things have changed. There are many more advances now to our cameras, but these changes are terrific because you could do stuff that you could never do before. You could shoot with more dramatic lighting because the dynamic range of these cameras. Does everyone know what dynamic range is? Or some people know what? Basically, more highlight, more shadow. You could shoot a lot more different things. And you could also shoot with higher ISO, which is really something that's changed my life and should change yours. Remember the days of film? Anyone here ever shoot that four-letter word? I remember in film, when I was shooting transparency film, ISO 200 was a big number. Now I'm starting out my shooting at ISO 200. And the fact that you could shoot high ISO is terrific because I could now shoot stuff that was unphotographable in the past. So I want to talk a little bit about what you could do now to make yourself a better photographer, what you could do to make better travel photography. All right, so right now, everybody's traveling and taking pictures. There is a clutter of photos on the internet, and a lot of them are fairly mediocre because everyone's taking pictures, and of course, everyone's taking pictures with their phone cameras, and who's seen this? You go to some place and there are 4,800 people with selfie sticks. You've got to watch where you're walking to, not to get knocked in the head with it. So it's up to me, and therefore it's up to you as a photographer to try to take better, more inspiring images. And you've got to think more about what you're doing. And I usually say that the three critical things to make a good image are light, the composition, and the moment. Now, basically, that's the truth for every photographer, but how you define the light, how you define the composition, how you define the moment's going to change. You saw Michael's pictures. They're going to be totally different than what I'm showing, but he and I are always looking for something special, some image that says something, that has a feeling. The other thing that I want to just mention right up front is your responsibility as a photographer, the ethics of photography. You want to take pictures that are true to what you're doing. And sometimes you've got to be careful about that. This is in Myanmar, Inle Lake. So I see this, I'm out, here's this fisherman with his net. They paddle with their foot because their hands are busy handling the nets. It's nice light. I've got a little fire going here, which helps bring your eye to it. But I find out that these guys aren't fishermen. They're really performers. They can make more money performing for tourists than they can fishing. So the tourist boats show up and these guys get out there with their nets and they start balancing and doing all these tricks. It makes a good picture, right? It's not, hey, but I felt that it was necessary when I put a caption on this picture, when I put it up on my Instagram feed, to tell the truth about what was really going on. So, you could take a picture of something that's not the way it is, but I think it's your responsibility to let people know what's really happening. This is the reality. This is a real fisherman. But it's not quite, it doesn't have the same sort of unique funniness the other picture had, but I like the picture anyway, and this is one of the things I do with my photography when I shoot pictures, trying to take things to the next step, is I try to build in layers. And I think even Michael talked about layers. So we're all on the same page about this, right? So, something going on in the foreground, maybe get something else going on in the middle ground, and then, have a background. It sounds like it's easy to do, but it takes some practice and takes some skill. The other thing that was interesting about the digital age, and I love shooting with digital, and I love the new small cameras that I have from Sony because they're very unobtrusive, they're easy to walk around with, and the image quality is incredible. But what's funny about digital is now you're shooting very quickly, Michael's shooting very slowly, I'm shooting quickly, and I'm out on a boat, I'm shooting, and when I get back home and I really get a chance to look at the photos, you find a surprise like this, the magical fish jumping. And that's the thing, to me, photography has a lot of magic going on. I even remember when I first started, when I was a kid in high school and developing my first film and making my first prints, that moment when the image started coming up on the paper in the darkroom, and it was like magic. Well, to me, it's magic when you get back and you start looking at your images and you had a generally good image and something special pops up and happens. Of course, it could go the other way. Sometimes you get back and you look at your image and something special pops up and ruins your image. So to me, to make a good image, you get a general composition going and you start building on that composition. You start adding stuff that's going to help tell the story and help make your image better. Conversely, sometimes you get some crap in your image in the background that ruins your image. So you've always got to be aware. You've always got to be thinking. When I was in Myanmar, I was in Bagan, which has all these great temples. And I was shooting the temples. The light's nice and the structure of the temple's very good. Made some good pictures, but Myanmar's changing. There's a lot of things different going on there now. So I wanted to tell more of the story about what was going on. And tourism was one of the big things happening. So there are tourist rides on balloons. And I try to get this image which will show the old and the new. Plus, it's giving me the layers I was talking about. Something in the foreground, something going on in the background. It adds depth to the pictures. However, being a photographer, I'm never satisfied. Once you become satisfied as a photographer, I think you're finished. You always have to be questioning yourself, what you're shooting, what's going on. So I found more of the same, but different. Different kind of structures, different shapes. You know, I like the way the shape of the top here mimics the balloons a little bit. I'm always looking for little details. These are details that the average person doesn't see, except they say, wow, that picture looks good. They don't know why that photo looks good, but they just feel it looks good. It's because all these little details are helping. And of course, I had to go for a balloon ride. And it ended up being an overcast morning. The sun didn't really pop up too well. But I waited, and you get that point of light. See, you know, where the balloon's being fired, the hot air is being fired. And just that one point of light brightens the picture, gives you a different sense of what's going on. So even in situations where you think things aren't going to work, things can work. And then while we were getting ready to land, I saw this going on. This is terrific. Look at this. I've got the old and I've got the new balloon there. I've got this big sort of like lion-shaped animal and these oxen pulling a cart. And I shoot a lot into the light. I like shooting into the light to get mood and feeling. And now with these cameras and these terrific lenses, you could do it. You could shoot into the light. It's great. But what's even more important to me, and I mentioned it earlier, was, you know, the high ISO capabilities. So let's look at a couple of things. There was a religious festival going on, and I don't understand why, but they had a heavy metal rock group playing there. It's part of the new Myanmar. And I went out for a walk at about 11:30 at night because I heard a lot of music and I saw a lot of lights. So you've got to be curious. You've got to keep going out and doing things. So I go out for a walk, I see them testing the stage lighting, and all these young people are out there. You know, they're not, you know, used to this stuff happening. So, you know, young girls taking selfies. And I think I was probably shooting at, you know, ISO 8000 for this picture. You think 8,000's high? We got a couple of things coming up I'm going to show you. So shooting at 8,000 ISO, I was able to get a picture like this, you know, a picture like this. So the high ISO has really allowed me to shoot in places I could never shoot before. And having the small profile camera really makes it easy to approach people. You're much less obtrusive. Another high ISO image, a monk taking a selfie of himself, but he's got the camera. You could like turn the camera to see yourself, but I don't think he figured that out yet. So he's got the camera the other way. This is in Marrakesh at a market. And what I do is a lot of times I find a background or a situation that has promise. And I wait and I work that situation. And a lot of that is from my experience. You get a certain feeling as a photographer. This has potential. This is going to work for you. So I found a high point, and I was shooting the market, but you know, this is one of these times when, you know, a lot of little people, right? It's nothing special's happening yet. And I saw this car coming, and the headlights were throwing these fantastic shadows. So now I've got the scene, but I have what I call an anchor. I have something that like brings your eye into the scene. So it's not just a lot of little itsy bitsy people. You come into the scene, you see the light source, you see these shadows, and then you can examine it again. So it's thinking about what you're shooting, thinking about here. So we've got composition and we've got light. This is not the kind of situation that has a real moment in it. This is in the desert, and now, so here I was on a tripod, nothing was moving, so I could shoot at a more normal ISO. And this is an example, incredible dynamic range where, I've got highlights in the lamps, highlights here, but you see all the detail in the shadows, and you see some of the detail in these dark tints. So the dynamic range is another factor that gives you the ability to shoot pictures that tell a story that you could not have shot 5 years ago. Now, here's another image at 52,100 ISO. This is totally lit by candles, and it's still unreal to me that you could get this kind of picture. One of the things that the high ISO does for you is it gives you the ability to knock up your shutter speed higher. So here I'm probably shooting like 125th of a second. So for all of you, and I tell this to a lot of people, don't be afraid to push your ISO. Don't be afraid to get up to, like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, because I'd rather have a picture that's at 3,000 or 4,000, maybe not perfect noise compared to a ISO of 100 or 200, but I'm shooting at 125th of a second. I'm going to stop some action, or I could shoot it at 250th. If you take a picture at a 30th or a 15th of a second at ISO 200 and the people are moving and you have a blurred picture, I don't care how good your image noise quality looks, your picture's blurred. Get rid of it. So do not be afraid to use higher ISOs. Work the higher ISOs, get yourself a better shutter speed, and you're going to salvage a lot of your images. Even things as simple as this. This portrait of this young lady was made with flashlights. There were some flashlights on her, and I was able to shoot, I think this is probably about 5,000 ISO, and I tend to use zoom lenses a lot. Everyone here, most people here use zoom lenses, right? It's good, first of all, it's simple. Secondly, when you're running around in certain conditions, you don't want to be changing lenses. You're worried about dust getting on your sensor. So I use zoom lenses, except when I'm going out at night or working in low light situations. So this was, I think, a 55 millimeter 1.8. So I could shoot wide open and get all this great detail and get, nice catch lights in her eyes. Does anyone know what that's on her face? Yeah, someone who said it? Tanaka. Yes, someone said Tanaka, but he's the pitcher for the Yankees. They call it, they call it Tanaka. Yeah, it says, they put it on their face to prevent, it's good for their skin, it prevents sunburn, and it does have some cultural implications. So that was good, somebody knew. I was shooting backstage at a Chinese opera, and I had just gotten a new 90 millimeter macro lens, and I wanted to, play around doing portraits with it. And I'm shooting, again, a fairly high ISO 3200, which now that you've seen pictures at, 52,000, 3200 doesn't really seem very high anymore, does it? It's sort of like, oh yeah, I'll just set it at 3200 and you don't have to think about it. So with that lens, I was able to focus on this eyeball where she's, I think it's a boy, it's where he's putting on makeup. But what I love is these lenses now have this incredible bokeh. Everyone know bokeh? Or, you know, it's the way the out of focus background looks. You can see the highlights and how they get these great shapes. And the same thing in this one. I'm focused on her, but look how nice that background looks. So whoever thought before about what an out of focus background would look like, right? You're always concentrating on the image. Now I'm thinking, how's my background going to look? And if you really think about it, for years, you've been seeing this. When you go to the movies, although not that many people go to the movie theaters anymore, everyone's streaming stuff on Netflix. But when you're at the movies and you're looking at that 16:9 wide screen and they do a portrait of someone on the screen, they've got a portrait here and then it probably goes like, whoa, this far of empty space. So at night, how the background looks out of focus is critical to the cinematographer. And you'll see, you know, think about it, you see all those like lights that are out of focus. So they've been doing this in Hollywood for years and years. And I also like to shoot horizontal portraits. I don't know why, it's just more pleasing to me. Now this is an interesting story. I was in Mongolia, and I was doing this night shot of the Milky Way with one of the yurts, or gears as they call them there. And I knew what time, I knew the moon was supposed to rise about 2 a.m. And once the moon rises, the Milky Way gets washed out. So I was doing my pictures before the moon came up, and you look at this tent, it was pitch black there. So what was I doing? I was lighting the tent with a flashlight to, you know, get some detail in it. Anybody here do night astrophotography? A couple of people. So this exposure is probably about 25 seconds. When you start getting a longer exposure, you see the stars streak. About 25 seconds, f2.8, maybe ISO 2500. And I was thinking, this is great. I got this picture nailed. And I was looking at my watch and I'm saying, yeah, we're getting close. The moon's going to come up. And I looked over and I saw this bright glow on the horizon, almost like a sunrise, but it was the moon rising. And I thought, all right, I'm finished. And I turned and I looked at the tent and I got this. And I shot the picture, and, you know, maybe about 2 minutes later, the moon came up enough and I lost the Milky Way. Let's look at the, so I thought, you know, hey, this is, you know, a good shot. And look at the little difference there. I've got the glow on the horizon. So as good as I am with lighting, I think, you know, Mother Nature beat me out on this one for sure. The other interesting thing that happened was when I was in Iceland, I was in Reykjavik, and I'd been running around the city trying to chase a couple of auroras. And I had some stuff, but it's difficult in a city. It's too light, the buildings, nothing ever lines up right. It must have been about 2 in the morning, get back to my hotel, and I look out the window, and I've got this pretty good aurora, and my hotel had a red neon sign on the side of the hotel, and it was reflecting onto the house over there, and I go, whoa, this is like not bad. I've got red, I have green, it's all coming together. So I quickly set my tripod up, and got this image. And again, you know, as a photographer, you need to get lucky. But I think as a photographer also, you just plan your luck. Some things just happen to you sometimes. Of course, there are times when it goes the other way and you're waiting and doing stuff forever and nothing does happen. So this was another instance of luck, and I think you could see from this one thing has happened as a result of digital photography. You don't get much sleep anymore because you can shoot at all hours, and there's interesting things going on. You could really, so part of the new thing about doing your travel photography is you could look into cultures a lot more deeply. And again, you know, you never stop thinking, never stop working. This is in Iceland. Probably a bunch of you have been to Iceland, I'm sure, right? Any few people here have been to Iceland? This is a real famous church in the town of Vik. Everybody does this picture. I photographed it in the snow. I photographed it, you know, in the summer. But you can't be happy with that. You've got to keep looking. Now, I've got this. I found this other church in the snow, and I saw these, you know, bare trees which produced a great line and composition for this shot. So it's, you know, always looking, always thinking, never being satisfied. Same thing happens with, you know, the Icelandic ponies. Right? Everybody, you know, ponies are cute. By the way, has anyone noticed that the hair, the mane on this horse looks, the color's pretty similar to someone that's running for president? All right, we'll keep going. I had some strange comments on my Instagram feed when I put a similar picture up. So, you know, this is the typical picture of your horse, but, you know, start looking for something different, something more abstract. Get in, you know, the eye, or even something like this where you've got, again, the layers that I talk about. I've got the foreground, I've got that shape of the horse in the background. It's out of focus, but you know it's a horse, and it just all fits together. So I'm never satisfied. Here's a series on some monks. You know, some nice picture of these novice monks all crushed in, waiting online to get something. But I'm looking to get something better as a monk shot. And I found this. I saw this light coming. The novice monk was adjusting his robes. I had the beautiful light coming through, and then you see that little bit of, you know, light on the edge of his face, right? Do it on this one. So, you know, that really helped. You know, just that little thing really helps make the picture. And just like here, I was shooting these monks, and this was a longer lens. This is, I think, a 70-200, but I liked the way the light was bouncing on the floor and lighting the guy's face over here. And I was able to shoot, you know, I think 3200 ISO. And what's great is I remember with film, you know, you'd have like your higher speed film, 200 speed Kodachrome or whatever, and then you'd go outside and you'd have to put another roll in of your 64 Kodachrome or your 100 speed Velvia. But so here I'm inside shooting at a high ISO, and then I run out and I turn around outside and I get monk laundry day. But I was able to, you know, adjust my ISO and, you know, make this shot. Okay, so let's get into a little camel work here. This is a nice shot. I thought of the camels, you know, I found these great sand dunes, and I just waited. I saw these camels coming up, and I just waited for the camels to come by and, you know, have the nice shape of the sand dunes. But I also wanted to get a little closer to things, so yeah, I made friends with this camel woman, and I just came back from Tokyo a few days ago. I had an exhibit of these Mongolia pictures, and something I didn't even notice, somebody pointed out to me how the lips of the woman and the lips of the, right, the lip, you know, like her lips and the camel's lips are, I didn't even notice that. Someone came up to me, and you know, someone in Japanese was trying, and then they walked over to the picture, and like, oh, so it's important to, you know, be able to get your people looking relaxed, looking like a camel. And so how do you do that? You make friends with the people, right? So those camels were actually Bactrian camels, you know, the two hump ones in Mongolia. And I just thought, as long as we're onto camels, this is in Morocco, and I don't know, a bunch of you, I'm sure, have been on these camel trips, and you know, the shadows are great, and you know, I'm shooting the shadows, but I wanted something more. I wanted to take the picture to another level. So I waited until the camels were making a turn. So now I'm able to get the shadows and the actual real camels in the same frame. So I just added another little something to an already interesting situation. So at that point, I figured, forget about Uber, forget about Zipcar. I found a new transportation mode. You know, and you don't need a trunk. Look, I was able to hang everything off the saddle. I've got the pack, the tripod, a camera, ready to go. The other thing that I'll do sometimes is I will set up pictures, and I'll set them up more as an illustration. So here we set this picture up of the little novice monk, and it was lit by candles. And I was actually with a workshop this time, and I was trying to teach the students, you know, how to build a picture, how to work with light. So we had candlelight, there's some window light coming in, and then the rest we did with flashlights, just regular flashlights. We're holding flashlights and we're lighting other areas up. And in this case, for this image, I used a pretty wide angle lens, probably the 16 to 35 at 16 millimeters. I left the window in. I've got some frames without the window, but sometimes leaving a light source in helps, even though this light source is really not lighting up everything, but it helps give you the view of the feeling of, okay, there's a source of light, and that is what's lighting it up. Does that seem to make sense? It, you know, kind of works with you that way. And we did the same thing a couple of weeks ago. I was in Cuba, and we had these ballet dancers at this old house, and we had a workshop going, and you know, just to kind of teach people how to work with light, looking for light. A lot of times I walk into a place, if it's a dark place, what's the first thing I do? I go to where there's light so I could take some pictures. You know, I look for light, I look for color. And the dynamic range makes these kind of pictures possible. There's detail in the background in that old radio. There's detail in the highlights of the girl's dress. This is stuff that was impossible. This picture could never have been done on film. And here, same thing. I was looking for details, looking, what can I do? And I'm very careful about composition. I made sure her head was in the middle of the window pane. Yeah, I didn't want the pane cutting through her head. I made sure her legs had some separation so they didn't look like a blob, that they had some form and shape. And again, the dynamic range is able to pull all that in. I found this bedroom there that I liked the green wall. And I said, oh, there's an ugly fluorescent lamp on the wall. And I said, and then I said, let's turn the lamp on. And I turned the fluorescent lamp on, and it suddenly made the whole situation more eerie, right? It just gives it a funky look. And I mean, maybe I'm seeing into things a little bit too much. You'll tell me, but I won't listen. But, okay, so there's a crucifix here, right? To me, then you see this and these two lamps here. You know, the shapes are, there's some repetitiveness in the shape that I'm seeing. So it's, you know, composition here, and then the light and the color of the background. Just like this picture is a lot about strictly composition, you know, seeing the repeating squares and the repeating laundry hanging. And this too was in Cuba. So how do you take something even to the next step? I'm in Cuba. I've been working in Cuba a lot. I've been going there since '97. And I also like baseball. So I thought, I'm going to look at Cuba. I'm going to pick a theme and look at the culture through that theme. So I decided, this is about 2013, to do a project on baseball and how it affects Cuba's culture. And, you know, lately Cuba's been in the news. So I started shooting pictures of baseball in Cuba. And I've been doing this for the last 2.5 years. I finally had to finish. You have to end sometime. So I finished this project in December. Now I'm working on a book and some other things. I'm sorry I don't have it here to sign yet, but it hasn't even been printed. So I started working on baseball, not so much pro ball, but like grassroots, but I did shoot some of the pro ball so I could have a continuum of like what happens. But when I was shooting pro ball, I was looking more to it as like the poetry of baseball. You know, and this to me looks almost like a little ballet with the turns and the shapes. But also, you know, picking a theme like this, it's like a window to the culture of Cuba using baseball. And, you know, working with just shapes and forms and colors and, you know, kids playing baseball and flip-flops, and a little story about the ball on the streets. These kids can't afford balls. We're lucky he's got a bat. So the kids take a stone, wrap it in paper, and then wrap surgical tape around it. That's how they make balls. So how did I get friendly with the kids? I found a place that sold surgical tape, bought a couple hundred rolls every time I wanted to shoot some kids. So you need some tape, and, you know, and they can make balls. Finding a background, waiting for things to happen, waiting for the moment where the kid's hand is right. This is all stuff, you know, my mind's constantly working. Finding another good background, but instead of keeping it flat, you know, having a little corner. And, you know, here I got really lucky because I've got a nice, you know, little pedicab going by at the same time that I have some action happening there. I mean, when this kid was catching the ball, I could have had a bus or something else that didn't fit. But I did get lucky, and I'm always looking for different angles. So I talked my way in. I was shooting these kids playing, and I saw the shadows, and I talked my way into somebody's apartment, got on the balcony, moved the drying laundry apart, and started shooting down. And this, again, you know, I had the good shadows, and I got really lucky. The white ball hit the shadows. This is in a stadium, and there's a print of this I have made that's hanging in Chelsea Piers. This is 6 by 9 feet, which is probably about the size of this on the screen. So 6 by 9 feet, and this is from a 24 megapixel camera, and you don't see any noise in it. It's, you know, beyond what I could think what can be done now with your images. Looking at a little different setting here, you know, seeing the net, seeing the guy hitting, using a wide-angle lens. I saw this great mural on the wall and this kid out there, and I just waited. You know, he's, you know, red and blue, and he's got red hat, blue. And I'm just, you know, I just sat there. You've got to be so patient to take great pictures. And I waited until his arm was in just the right place. And of course, I had to do a picture of Fidel with a baseball bat. And these are some of the food stands. It's not quite like going to a city field and going to eat a Blue Smoke or the Shake Shack there. This is some of the yummy food that they're serving. But the people do seem to enjoy it. But even with this theme going, I started looking at all my pictures. You know, what am I missing? What don't I have? In my coverage of baseball, I've got the young kids, middle-aged kids, you know, older kids, the pro players. What was I missing? I was missing older guys playing baseball. And I found a league of people in their 60s, 70s that are playing ball. Some of them were ex-pros, and they could still throw really well, and they could hit well. The only thing that was funny was I was at a game, and one of the guys slid into third base, and it took him about a half an hour to get up. So I found these ball players, and I found a good background. And I went out, and I set up a big strobe just to get, you know, a little fill light, you know, and some sparkle on the faces. I didn't want to overdo it and make it look super strobe lit. That would be a different look. So these guys all had different uniforms. So in between innings, we'd grab someone, had that same wall, had the strobe set up, get him out there, get a picture of him. So here's a little, so this is like a theme within my theme using a different technique. Just, you know, these guys still love playing ball. They're older, and this really helped finish what I needed to do on the baseball project. And I thought, like, everyone in a different uniform was great. And even someone wearing a pure white uniform, again, getting back to things like dynamic range, you know, there's detail throughout the whole thing. He's got really dark skin, but it's all coming together. It all works, technically. And then, just to be politically correct, I think I better, you know, add a young lady into the mix of things. So let me go over a couple of points that I've been talking about, because I know I'm like throwing out all this information. You know, making a good picture, I like working in layers. So I saw them butchering a goat. This little girl was pretty cool here, right? And she's got pink shoes. You know, I had this background of the yurts, but I wanted to fill spaces. So I have this man standing here. And then I just waited, and I got lucky. I got that dog going right there, and the dog's body language, you know, his legs and everything are perfect. And I've got a horse way back in here. This is, you know, this is a complex image. But this is the type of image I like to shoot because it gives you information and it takes you into the imagery. The other thing I do is, and somebody interviewed me, we did a whole article on this, is finding a background that's pretty interesting and tells a story, and then waiting for something to happen in front of it. So this is, you know, an interesting picture, good color. Part of the story is that Shay's face has been like a little defaced a little bit, which is wouldn't it have happened in Cuba years ago. And I just waited and waited. I had some people walking by, but this kid, he's got the red bag, which plays off the red there, and the red shorts. So I found a background and I waited and eventually came up with the image. The other thing I look for is atmospherics. This is Tiger's Nest in Bhutan. I've been up there, I think, 5 times, and I've never really ever got a good image of it until this trip when the fog started rolling in, and it just made it seem more special and more spiritual. And I was at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and everyone shoots this. But you know, here I just, instead of just the temples, I did a reflection of the temples in the water. So this is a familiar scene, right? I was at the top of the rock. You shoot this picture, but again, looking for something different, I turned around and I saw everyone taking pictures, but the sun setting, reflecting in this piece of glass there. So just trying to find something different. And I want to mention, you know, there's a new way of communication. You know, I'm big into social media because you get a lot of feedback from people. And then when I work for the magazine, pictures go out there, but you don't get any feedback. Social media, I read the comments, I see what people are saying. This is, to me, the new way of communicating. You get feedback, you get your pictures out there pretty quickly. I could take a picture with my cameras. My cameras have Wi-Fi in them, and a lot of them do now. And I could Wi-Fi the image from the camera to my cell phone and post it immediately on Instagram or Facebook. So it's really exciting to me. This is a great new way to communicate. And before I ride off into the sunset here, I thought probably a lot of people, you know, may have some questions, and just to show you a little bit about equipment. So this is typically what I could use a lot: a bunch of cameras, lenses, a big tripod. You know, most of the time I take this tripod, which is smaller. And then when in doubt, I've got this tripod, which is, you know, about that big, but I always have that one with me. I could always mount it on a table or a wall. And usually, if I know I need a tripod, I take this. And the big one I use for more real, you know, like commercial, serious setups. And a couple of 3 cameras and a bunch of lenses. But this is a remote control to trigger the stuff for my night photos. And, you know, carrying all this stuff, I carry a lot of stuff. So usually I use this timber rolling bag to get on the plane, because especially if you're changing planes, you know, you land in some airport, like if I'm going to Southeast Asia, I'll fly to Tokyo, 14 hours, and then I've got another 7-hour flight to Bangkok. And you're getting off the plane, and you know the next plane is 20 miles away, so, and you're, you know, like half asleep. So the rolling bag is good to have. But when I'm working, I found the bigger the bag you take when you're working, the more you tend to fill it up, and then you get tired. So I found Tenba has a small bag. It's actually meant for the GoPro. I think they call it a GoPro bag. And I just took all their things out, and I was able to find an insert that worked, so I could carry like one body on me, and maybe, you know, with a lens, and another 2 lenses and a flash in this little bag, and it's pretty lightweight. I think here my little baby tripod's peeking out of there. So, you know, I sometimes see people trying to work and walk through the streets carrying these giant bags, and I'm thinking, wow, that's not going to work. You know, you want to be like low key. You don't want to kill your body. You know, you start off at 6 in the morning. By noon, if you've been carrying that bag. So, you know, I just try to keep everything small and compact. So I think, you know, also, and, you know, I keep like hard drives and extra batteries when I'm getting on the plane.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.